Elizabeth I of England and Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, one of the greatest mysteries of all time. Did they or didn't they? In this What the Hell video, we're going to discuss the relationship, and I'm going to tell you my own theory if I think that Elizabeth and Robert Dudley had intimate relationship. And if they did, I'm going to tell you when I think it could have happened, and I'm going to give you dates and details. Elizabeth I of England and Robert Dudley have really marked history by their kind of platonic love. We know that she truly had a thing for him. We know that she kept his last letter under her pillow until her death. We know that they had a friendship that was more than a friendship. We know that Leicester really wanted to marry Elizabeth. What is very hard to understand though is, were they really in love? Was there lust involved? And also, was Leicester in love with Elizabeth or in love with power? I've always said that for me Elizabeth was power hungry, and not because she just loved power. Power meant security and stability. I want us to remember that she had a very difficult childhood, teenage years. So when she became queen, becoming queen meant a stability, a form of stability, a form of security. And giving that away to a man in potential childbirth that would lead to her death, it was not something very appealing to her. We know that Robert Dudley, thanks to the brilliant Dr. John Paul and a brilliant book, The House of Dudley, we know that Robert Dudley was also power hungry. He comes from a family, we can even say, of traitors. He comes from a family of people who've always been behind a Tudor monarch. He's probably the one who's the most successful in the ways that he was behind the monarch, but in a very favorable way. He lost favor at times, but never was at risk to losing his life. So I think here we can say that he was the most successful Dudley in terms of keeping his head on his shoulders, but also on having a real political career at the Tudor court. And I think it's mostly because of his relationship with Elizabeth. And I think we can talk about some sort of love, of a love relationship, a complex one, a very difficult one, but at the same time a very kind of intriguing one. In this video, I'm not going to go into the early years where Robert Dudley is married to Amy Robsart and with her death, because that should represent its own video in itself that I will probably also make for another What the Hell in History video, if that interests you. Now, what do we actually know about Elizabeth and Robert Dudley? What we know is their closeness. There were lots of rumors about their closeness. I mean, when you have to think about it, like, we would not still be talking about it 500 years later if there was absolutely nothing between them at all whatsoever. So it obviously means that there were rumors strong enough that they lasted for centuries. Now, having said that, in these rumors we have to take into account that everyone had their political agendas, and that is also true for anyone who reported rumors. What I know from the French ambassador's reports is the fact that a few of them, Paul de Foix or Bertrand de Salignac de la Motte Fénelon, reported that they saw Robert Dudley leaving the Queen's bedchamber early in the morning. Two things about that though. We have to be careful with these reports. Why? Number one, do they mean that they saw them or saw him leaving the bedchamber, the private bedchamber of Elizabeth, with their own eyes? If so, what were they doing there so early in the morning? I mean, I need you to understand that the private chambers of Elizabeth was not easily accessible. They obviously had like all the chambers to go through before going to the private chamber. We know they've been invited to the private chambers for audiences when Elizabeth is trying to discuss delicate matters. It doesn't mean, however, that they had access to the Queen very early in the morning at 5 a.m. or something to see if someone was leaving the room. So it brings me to my second point, where I think that they had informants who was reporting that they saw Robert Dudley leaving the bedchamber, the private bedchamber of Elizabeth I so early in the morning. It might have been a servant, it might have been a lady in waiting. Now, I've always joked when I give talks about the fact, what would they do all night? Obviously they're not playing chess or cards or whatever you can imagine. At the same time, I want you to remember that Elizabeth was not free to do whatever she wanted, and she had sleeping companions, and I'm going to go to that. So I think it would have been very difficult for Elizabeth and Robert Dudley to actually have anything done at court, at a palace like Hampton Court, Greenwich Palace, Richmond, because it would just have been very difficult to keep it secret. Elizabeth could not really afford to be seen as someone so promiscuous, especially with what happened when she was younger. Yet it doesn't mean that I don't think that nothing happened at all. There is a time and place where I think something could have happened. I think that before there were probably some closeness and some time where they were alone, but I don't think that would have happened really often. And I think it would have been very risky for Elizabeth to show too much closeness to Leicester. However, we know that from the 9th July to the 27th of July, 1575, Elizabeth went to Kenilworth for 19 days. Kenilworth had been given to Robert Dudley as a gift. She used to really show him lots of favour. And so I think here there was lots of opportunities for them to be alone with one another. Another thing that I think very intriguing is that one of Elizabeth's favourite companions, sleeping companion, Mary Scudamore, had lost favour in 1575, in early 1575, and she was not back at court before 1576. Let me just tell you a bit about that story before we dive in again into what might have happened at Kenilworth Castle. Mary Scudamore was the daughter of Sir John Shelton, his wife Margaret Parker. She joined the household of Queen Elizabeth around the year 1567, and she was one of her closest sleeping companion. She received an allowance of clothing, including satin for a gown and similar fabric every year. Some of her clothes were gifts from the Queen, made by her own tailor, Walter Fish. The problem was that in early 1575, she secretly married Sir John Scudamore without Elizabeth's approval. Elizabeth was furious, and it is said that she broke her finger and removed her from court. And I want to tell you, because people are like, oh my God, Elizabeth is a monster. You have to understand that you cannot marry without the Queen's approval. It's not something that you should be doing. There are laws about it. And when Elizabeth loses her temper, it's because for her, it felt always like a betrayal. She probably relied on Mary to be with her all the time. And now she probably knew that she was going to lose one of her favorite sleeping companions. When I say sleeping companions, obviously it means that Elizabeth had very little time on her own. Bear that in mind. But if Mary was her favorite sleeping companion and she was not there at Kenilworth Castle, we can assume that obviously probably someone else replaced her. That Elizabeth had a bit more freedom, had a bit more time to spend alone with Robert Dudley, the Earl of Leicester. And I really believe that if anything ever intimate really truly happened, it might have been in this castle. Probably because Leicester knew all the corridors and ways to get to the chamber of Elizabeth. They had also a massive garden in Kenilworth Castle where they could have played around and fool around. And I like the idea that during that summer they get closer and that maybe they enjoyed each other's company a bit more. The truth is, we will never know if Elizabeth was truly a virgin. I personally hope that she wasn't for herself. But that's beyond the point. But what I mean here, I really think that it shows also their strong bond. The fact that she spent 19 days in his house. The fact that they shared so much. It was a friendship with definitely love behind it. A love that could not be, completely consumed. That could not be lived. And that's probably why she wept so much when he died after the Armada on the 4th September 1588. 3 days before her birthday. I think sometimes we tend to remove our ways of thinking about what they meant for each other. And in my views, they were kind of soulmates that could not fulfill their role as partner in that life because of the political contentions, because of the religious contentions, because they were born in many ways in the wrong families. I really hope that you enjoyed this What the Hell in History video about did they or didn't they. I know I didn't bring to you kind of a full answer here. I believe that something really strong happened during Kenilworth, maybe even before, maybe even after, but definitely at Kenilworth in the summer 1575. Leave your comments down below and let me know what you think. When it could have happened? If it happened? Tell me just your thoughts. I love hearing from you. Thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye!